The average American household is drowning in $104,215 of debt, the crushing reality facing millions of families trying to stay afloat while chasing an increasingly expensive dream. Like quicksand, this debt pulls you deeper the more you struggle against it. What began as stepping stones toward your future has transformed into financial shackles, weighing heavier with each passing year. In this video, I'm breaking down how the American dream transformed into a debt nightmare and why your mortgage, car loan, and credit cards are creating the perfect storm of financial stress. If you've ever felt like you're working harder but getting nowhere, this feeling reflects a system working exactly as designed, the dream that became a nightmare. Remember when the American dream meant owning a cute house with a white picket fence, 2.5 kids, and retiring comfortably at 65? Yeah, that's not exactly how things are working out for most of us. The American dream used to be pretty straightforward. Work hard, play by the rules, and you'd earn your slice of middle-class paradise. Our grandparents and parents grew up with this promise: a modest but comfortable home in a safe neighborhood, a reliable job that kept the bills paid, and the security of knowing retirement wouldn't mean eating cat food to survive. It was about stability, security, and the simple dignity of owning the roof over your head. During the 1950s and 60s, this was actually achievable for huge portions of the population. A single breadwinner with a high school education could support a family of 4, buy a house, own a car, take summer vacations, and still save for the future. College was affordable enough that students could work part-time to cover most tuition without massive debt. Housing typically consumed about 25% of a family's income, far less than the 40 to 50% many Americans struggle with today. But then came the turning point. The achievable version of the American dream underwent an extreme makeover. Reasonable goals transformed into expensive fantasies, and the entire equation flipped on its head. The dream mutated into something virtually unrecognizable. Consider homes. In 1970, the median home price was about $23,000, approximately $177,000 in today's dollars. The actual median home price now? Over $400,000, more than double what it would be if housing had simply kept pace with inflation. This gap is even wider in coastal cities and booming metro areas. Meanwhile, wages have flatlined for decades when adjusted for inflation. The typical worker today has only about 10% more purchasing power than in 1973, despite productivity increasing by nearly 65%. All that extra value went somewhere, but not into the average person's paycheck. College costs tell a similar story. In 1980, a summer job at minimum wage could cover a significant portion of annual tuition at a public university. Today, a student would need to work full-time at minimum wage for an entire year just to cover tuition, without accounting for books, housing, or food. The result is our current student loan crisis, where young people start adulthood with mortgage-sized debt but no house. Cars, healthcare, childcare, across virtually every major expense category, costs have exploded, while incomes have barely moved. What was once an achievable milestone now requires massive debt just to participate. The crucial transformation, the American dream shifted from something you could earn to something you could only finance. It became less about ownership and more about maintaining the appearance of ownership while banks hold the actual titles. The white picket fence is now just a rental prop in most people's financial reality. This shift wasn't accidental. Over decades, policies evolved that transferred risk from institutions to individuals while making necessities more expensive. Student loans became non-dischargeable in bankruptcy. Pensions transformed into 401ks that tied retirement to the market's unpredictable swings. Healthcare became a maze of insurance policies with deductibles so high many avoid getting care even when insured. The numbers are stark. In the 1970s, the average 30-year-old could save about 15% of their income after covering basics. Today, most young adults struggle to save anything. Housing, healthcare, education, and childcare have consumed almost all income gains made over recent decades. Real-life manifestations include college graduates living with parents into their 30s, delayed or abandoned homeownership, multiple jobs just to cover rent and student loans, postponed parenthood due to childcare costs, and credit card debt for emergencies like car repairs or medical bills. Most insidiously, inability to achieve what previous generations did with relative ease gets framed as personal failure. Too many avocado toasts, not enough hustle, as if cutting a few coffees would magically close the gap between stagnant wages and skyrocketing costs. The issue is structural. If housing costs had risen at the same rate as income since 1970, the median home would cost less than half what it does today. If college tuition had kept pace with inflation, students wouldn't graduate with mortgage-sized debts. If healthcare costs hadn't exploded, medical bankruptcy wouldn't be uniquely American among developed nations. This isn't a temporary economic hiccup. It's a fundamental rewiring of the relationship between work, reward, and security. The formula of working hard to build a stable middle-class existence has been replaced by a reality where debt is the primary path to any semblance of the lifestyle previous generations took for granted. This transformation has created a nation where approximately 70% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, where medical bills are the leading cause of bankruptcy, and where retirement seems like a fantasy for many. The irony? We're working harder than ever. Productivity continues to rise, hours worked have increased, and more households have multiple income earners. The American dream has become a debt trap. Each step toward what we're told is success, college, car, house, career, now comes with financial handcuffs that limit freedom rather than expanding it. The dream meant to provide security now generates anxiety and uncertainty for millions. The millennial money squeeze. This financial anxiety isn't distributed equally across generations. In a twist that would be funny if it weren't so painful, millennials, the generation raised on big dreams, are experiencing something unprecedented. They're watching their wages actively decline, while every other generation sees increases. Ever wonder why so many 30-somethings seem perpetually stressed about money despite doing everything right? The numbers tell a shocking story. Recent data from Employment Hero reveals that between November 2024 and January 2025, millennial wages actually shrank by 0.6%. Meanwhile, everyone else got richer. Gen Z saw wages climb by 2.1%, Boomers enjoyed a comfortable 0.8% increase, and even Gen X squeezed out a modest 0.3% gain. Let that sink in. The only generation in America watching their paychecks get smaller is millennials. This wage decline persists long-term. Millennials have experienced a measly 2.4% wage growth rate compared to boomers, 7.7%, or Gen Z's impressive 8%. The generation that grew up hearing "you can be anything you want" is now falling financially behind everyone else. Take Marcus, a 35-year-old marketing manager who lives with 2 roommates despite his professional title. "I make more than my parents did at my age in raw dollars," he explains, "but somehow they owned a house and had 2 kids by now. I can barely make rent." So what happened? Terrible timing. Millennials entered the job market during or shortly after the 2008-2009 Great Recession, arguably the worst economic moment since the Great Depression. Entry-level jobs vanished overnight. Companies froze hiring. Older workers who lost retirement savings clung to their jobs, creating a bottleneck that blocked younger workers from advancing. This timing created a wealth gap for millennials, significantly larger compared to other generations at the same age. Imagine starting a race where everyone else got a 5-minute head start, and then someone keeps moving the finish line farther away just for you. Then, just as many millennials were finally gaining career momentum in their 30s, the COVID pandemic hit, delivering another economic gut punch during their prime earning years. These repeated economic setbacks fundamentally altered an entire generation's wealth-building trajectory. Consider Rachel Gambino and Garrett Mazzeo, a millennial couple who did everything society told them would lead to success. They got educated, found decent jobs, bought a home in the suburbs, and diligently paid down debts. By traditional measures, they should feel financially comfortable. Instead, they live according to a meticulously maintained spreadsheet where Garrett tracks every dollar. Despite following all the rules of responsible financial behavior, roughly 40% of their take-home income goes to housing costs alone. The pressure is relentless. What's particularly cruel is that the millennial money squeeze hits from both directions simultaneously. This generation carries the highest debt burden of any demographic group. Student loans are the obvious culprit, with the cost of attending a public four-year college rising more than 200% between 1987 and 2017. But the problem extends beyond education debt to inflated costs for healthcare, childcare, and housing that far outpace earnings. The housing affordability crisis hits millennials especially hard. Since 2012, housing prices have shot up by 86%. In that same period, millennial incomes have crawled up just 24%. The math doesn't work. The American dream of homeownership has transformed from an expectation into a fantasy for many. This financial pressure is reshaping life trajectories. Many millennials delay or completely abandon traditional milestones like marriage and having children simply because they can't afford them. When your financial foundation is built on quicksand, long-term commitments become frighteningly risky. The systemic nature of this problem becomes clearer when you consider that millennials aren't failing due to poor choices. This is the most educated generation in history. They followed the promised path to financial security: get a degree, work hard, save money, only to find the economic rules had changed midway through the game. This generational setback represents a structural shift in our economy. The declining wages amid record corporate profits suggests a fundamental disconnect between worker productivity and compensation that's hitting millennials hardest. For the broader economy, this generational wealth gap represents a ticking time bomb. As boomers retire, millennials aren't positioned to pick up the economic slack. They simply don't have the purchasing power their parents did at the same age. This threatens long-term economic vitality for everyone. This situation is often invisible in broader economic discussions. When politicians talk about a strong economy with low unemployment, they miss the generational inequality hiding beneath those headline numbers. A job market can be strong while failing to provide adequate wages for an entire generation. As for that supposed millennial love of avocado toast and fancy coffee, the ridiculous suggestion that small luxuries are keeping an entire generation from financial success, the math doesn't add up. No amount of coffee skipping would enable most millennials to overcome these structural financial hurdles. A generation experiencing wage declines while housing costs nearly quadruple their income growth isn't struggling because of lattes. They're caught in economic cross-currents beyond their control. The paycheck-to-paycheck reality. But this financial squeeze isn't just a millennial problem anymore. It's becoming America's new normal. Ever found yourself checking your bank account before buying groceries? Or maybe you've postponed a doctor's visit because the copay would wreck your budget? Congrats, you're not alone. You're experiencing the same paycheck-to-paycheck reality as half of all employed Americans today. And this financial tightrope walk has become standard even for those with advanced degrees and good salaries. The numbers paint a stark picture. According to a recent Bamboo HR survey, 50% of Americans with jobs struggle to make ends meet each month. We're talking about consistent, month-after-month financial strain despite being employed. Additionally, 43% report working more hours than ever before to stay afloat. These statistics represent millions of Americans walking a financial tightrope, balancing on the razor's edge of economic survival. This financial precarity spans across income brackets. Professionals earning $70,000, $80,000, or even $100,000 annually find themselves counting pennies by month's end. Consider Jessica, a marketing director making $85,000 a year, solidly middle class on paper. Yet her income rapidly evaporates through $2,300 monthly rent, $650 student loan payment, $480 car payment, $350 healthcare premiums, $1,200 childcare costs. After these essential expenses, she has almost nothing left for savings or emergencies, one unexpected bill away from financial crisis. This constant balancing act manifests in countless small sacrifices that erode quality of life. People postpone preventative health care because they can't afford copays. They ignore warning signs in their vehicles to avoid $400 repair bills. They use credit cards for groceries and utilities, not luxuries, just to make it through the month. Daily life becomes a series of impossible choices. pay the electric bill or fill a prescription, postpone car insurance to cover school supplies, use credit cards for groceries despite knowing they can only make minimum payments. The psychological toll matches the financial one. The American Psychological Association has declared a mental health crisis with financial stress as a primary driver. This is an occasional worry. It's a persistent anxiety that infiltrates every aspect of life, manifesting as physical symptoms like headaches, sleep disturbances, and digestive issues. Emotionally, it appears as depression, irritability, and relationship conflicts. When constantly worried about making rent or paying bills, that stress becomes a chronic condition, coloring everything else. Young adults bear the heaviest burden in this stress tsunami. A Harvard report found 56% of young adults say financial stress actively damages their mental health. More than half an entire generation experiences mental health impacts directly tied to their financial situation. This creates a vicious cycle. Financial stress leads to poor financial decisions, which creates more stress. The Bamboo HR survey revealed a direct link between compensation and mental health, with 36% of employees reporting that connection explicitly. Yet only 41% feel their current pay sustains their lifestyle. This creates a perfect storm where financial pressure leads to mental health challenges, making it harder to perform well at work, potentially jeopardizing their very income source. What deepens this crisis is the disconnect between workers and leadership. A full 61% of employees believe executives don't understand their financial struggles. This perception gap means companies often miss the severity of the problem, offering token solutions instead of addressing the fundamental issue, compensation that doesn't match actual living costs. For many, survival means working multiple jobs or constant side hustles. The gig economy has become a lifeline for millions who need extra income for basic expenses. People drive Uber after full-time jobs, sell homemade items online, deliver food on weekends, not for extra spending money, but for survival. The most troubling aspect is how financial stress affects decision-making. When constantly worried about money, cognitive bandwidth decreases. People become less able to think long-term or make optimal financial choices. This isn't a character flaw, it's a documented psychological response to scarcity. Financial stress literally changes how our brains work, making it harder to escape the circumstances causing the stress. Companies are beginning to realize employee financial wellness isn't just a nice perk, it's essential for a productive workforce. Financial stress decreases productivity, increases absenteeism, raises healthcare costs, and drives turnover. When employees constantly worry about money, they can't bring their full attention and creativity to work. This makes compensation not just a moral question, but a business imperative affecting the bottom line. The housing market mirage. Financial wellness programs might help employees manage stress, but they're band-aids on a gushing wound when you look at today's housing market. That cute little ranch house your parents bought for $80,000 in 1990? It's now $425,000, but your salary definitely didn't get the same upgrade. The math simply doesn't work anymore, creating a fundamental disconnect between the American dream we're sold and the financial reality most people face. The housing market of early 2025 resembles a mirage in the desert, appearing tantalizingly close yet vanishing when you approach it. Currently, the lock-in effect is dramatically reshaping market dynamics. Homeowners who secured 3% mortgage rates a few years ago face 6.5% rates today. This stark difference keeps existing homeowners in place, severely limiting inventory and driving prices higher. As housing economist Lawrence Yun recently noted, the lock-in effect has created the most stagnant housing mobility in 3 decades, fundamentally altering traditional market patterns. January 2025 data from the National Association of Realtors confirms this reality with a 4.6% decline in pending home sales. Fewer buyers are committing to purchases because affordability has eroded. The combination of high mortgage rates and inflated home prices forces many potential buyers to abandon homeownership dreams entirely. The concept of starter homes has essentially disappeared. Today, entry-level housing requires an upper-middle-class income just to qualify for financing. According to Redfin, Median home prices reached $418,284 in January 2025, increasing 4% in just 12 months. For median income earners, this price tag is prohibitively expensive given current interest rates. Homeownership has traditionally been the cornerstone of wealth building in America. Families bought homes, built equity, then leveraged that equity for education, retirement, or inheritance. This pathway is becoming inaccessible. When housing becomes unattainable, we're witnessing the dismantling of the primary wealth-building vehicle for middle-class families. Our perception of housing has fundamentally shifted over decades. Homes evolved from being primarily shelters to investment vehicles. This transformation in viewing housing has contributed significantly to the affordability crisis. When properties become assets expected to appreciate, living affordability becomes secondary to profit potential. Market experts are adjusting expectations downward. Zillow's February 2025 forecast now projects home values to increase by only 0.9% this year, significantly reduced from their previous 2.9% growth projection. This revision stems from more inventory entering the market, slightly easing price pressures. However, this minor correction won't substantially address the affordability gap. Fannie Mae predicts existing home sales will remain at 30-year lows throughout 2025, with mortgage rates staying above 6%. This combination suppresses housing activity through both affordability challenges and the lock-in effect. The market essentially freezes, yet prices continue climbing. Geographic market patterns are shifting in response. According to Zillow's senior economist Kara Neng, affordability will drive competition in the 2025 housing market. Cities like Buffalo, Indianapolis, and Kansas City top the list of hottest markets due to their relative affordability compared to coastal areas. Growth is also occurring in Providence, Hartford, and Philadelphia, offering lower costs than nearby Boston and New York. For average homeownership aspirants, these conditions mean indefinitely postponing a once normal life milestone. Others face massive debt burdens requiring decades to repay. Many face permanent renting with no path to building equity or wealth. Younger generations face particularly harsh consequences. The combination of student loan debt and astronomical housing costs creates a financial burden their parents never experienced. Many millennials and Gen Zers will spend prime earning years struggling with debt rather than building assets. The effects extend beyond housing itself. When housing consumes 40 to 50% of income instead of the recommended 30%, everything else gets squeezed. Retirement savings, emergency funds, health care, education, and quality of life. This financial strain creates vulnerability where any unexpected expense can trigger financial catastrophe. This crisis developed predictably through decades of underbuilding, restrictive zoning laws preventing density, housing financialization, and policies favoring investors over residents. These specific choices prioritized housing as an asset class rather than a basic need. The rental market offers no refuge. Rising rents make saving for down payments nearly impossible. Renters face a catch-22. Housing is too expensive to buy, while high rent prevents accumulating down payment funds. Meanwhile, years spent renting mean lost equity building opportunities and homeownership tax advantages. Looking ahead, potential improvements include modest inventory growth, potentially stabilizing prices, lower mortgage rates if Federal Reserve policies continue easing, and some cities addressing restrictive zoning laws. However, these changes will take years to meaning the credit card crisis. The housing market might be keeping the American dream out of reach, but there's an even sneakier financial trap that's already caught millions of Americans. Credit cards were supposed to be a helpful financial tool, right? So why are delinquency rates approaching levels we haven't seen since the 2008 recession? And what does that mean for your financial future? That little piece of plastic in your wallet has quietly transformed from a convenience into a $1.2 trillion national emergency. Americans now collectively owe $1.21 trillion on their credit cards as of December 2024, according to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. This represents a massive financial emergency hiding in plain sight, worsening daily. Credit card balances jumped by $45 billion in just the last quarter of 2024. That's everyday Americans increasingly relying on credit to bridge the widening gap between what they earn and what life actually costs. The average American carries around $6,380 in credit card debt. At today's interest rates, making only minimum payments means paying for more than 17 years and shelling out nearly 3 times the original amount in interest. For millions of Americans, this has become the only option to keep their financial lives from completely falling apart. Interest rates have become brutal. The average APR for current credit card accounts has shot up to 21.599% in early 2024. For new cards, expect to pay around 24.80%. These rates are predatory. Think of it as quicksand, with almost a quarter of every borrowed dollar going straight to interest. Each payment you make barely helps you escape as the debt pulls you deeper. The real danger isn't just the debt itself, but that more people can't pay it back. The delinquency rate for credit card loans hit 3.25% in mid-2024. More alarming is the flow into early delinquency. Accounts 30-plus days overdue, which reached 8.79% by the third quarter. Millions of Americans are missing payments, and that number grows daily. This affects responsible, hardworking Americans doing their best to stay afloat. Maria, a dental hygienist from Denver, always paid more than the minimum until this year. Between rent increases and grocery prices, I started using my card for essentials. Then my car needed repairs, and suddenly I was maxed out with no way to catch up. Credit card companies have designed their business model around you carrying a balance. They promote cash back, travel points, and sign-up bonuses while burying astronomical interest rates in fine print. They're selling debt disguised as rewards. These companies target financially vulnerable people. New college graduates get student cards with low limits to build credit. New city residents receive cards with moving expense rewards. People going through divorces see offers with balance transfers to help through difficult times. The marketing is both brilliant and predatory. What's truly concerning is how credit cards now fund basic necessities rather than luxuries. Americans increasingly use plastic for groceries, utilities, and medical expenses. Using high-interest credit for bread and electricity signals a fundamental economic problem, not just personal financial mismanagement. Samantha, an Atlanta teacher, explained, "I have a full-time teaching job and a weekend coffee shop gig, but by month's end, I'm using credit cards for gas and groceries. I know it's bad, but what choice do I have? My rent takes half my income." This creates a dangerous cycle. You charge groceries this month, planning to pay off the balance. Next month, you still need groceries, plus you must make payments on last month's charges. Soon, you're taking on new debt to service old debt. A financial death spiral. The psychological toll equals the financial impact. Constantly juggling accounts, calculating which bills to pay first, and lying awake worrying about money have become normal for millions. This chronic financial stress manifests as anxiety, depression, physical health problems, and strained relationships. Minimum payments represent perhaps the most insidious feature of this trap. Making the minimum payment, typically 2 to 3% of your balance, feels responsible. But credit card companies don't advertise that most of your payment goes to interest, not principal reduction. With a $6,380 balance at 21.59% interest, a minimum payment of about $160 would include roughly $115 just in interest. Only $45 actually reduces what you owe. At that rate, payoff takes over 23 years, costing more than $13,000 in interest alone, twice what you borrowed. This explains why credit card companies report record profits while Americans struggle. The system transfers wealth from the financially vulnerable to corporate shareholders. Rising delinquency rates approach levels we haven't seen since before the 2008 financial crisis. Combined with stagnant wages, housing costs, and inflation, these trends suggest potential economic turbulence affecting all Americans. Credit card debt compounds other financial problems. If you're already stretching your budget for housing, high-interest debt payments can be the tipping point, leading to missed rent, damaged credit, and eviction. One unexpected expense can collapse an already fragile financial situation. For younger Americans, credit card debt often accompanies student loans, creating a double burden that makes homeownership seem impossible. This holds back an entire generation from building wealth and financial security. the warning signs experts see. Credit card debt might be the most obvious symptom, but the real economic disease runs much deeper. Those fancy economic indicators the experts obsess over, they're flashing warning lights that haven't blinked this bright since 2008. While most Americans focus on their immediate financial challenges, economic analysts are tracking troubling patterns that mirror what happened right before previous market crashes. Patterns that rarely make the evening news. Think about it like this. Doctors check your vital signs when you're sick. Blood pressure, heart rate, and multiple measurements to get the full picture. Economic experts monitor our financial system similarly, and current readings have them seriously concerned. Rising delinquency rates across different types of loans stand as one of the biggest red flags right now. These rates function as early warning signals showing that increasing numbers of people cannot keep up with financial obligations. When these rates climb across multiple loan categories simultaneously, economic alarm bells start ringing. What's particularly concerning is how these delinquency patterns resemble what preceded the 2008 financial crisis. Back then, most regular folks remained unaware of what was coming until too late. Today, we may be approaching a similar cliff edge, while headline economic numbers present a much rosier picture. The Federal Reserve's latest data tells a concerning story. The delinquency rate for consumer loans hit 2.74% in the second quarter of 2024, representing thousands of Americans falling behind on payments. Meanwhile, the overall delinquency rate, including real estate and commercial loans, has been steadily climbing to 1.49%. The situation appears more troubling when examining specific loan categories. In the third quarter of 2024, 3.5% of unsecured personal loans were either delinquent or in hardship programs. Auto loan debt has grown to $1.644 trillion, with 1.4% of these loans seriously delinquent. These statistics reveal financial stress spreading through the system. This situation becomes especially tricky because these warning signs appear despite seemingly positive headline economic news. The stock market reaches record highs while disconnecting from the economic reality faced by average Americans, like a car with a pristine exterior hiding an engine that's beginning to smoke. The gap between stock market performance and household financial conditions creates a dangerous false sense of security. Politicians and business leaders point to strong market performance as evidence of a thriving economy, while millions of households struggle with mounting debt and financial anxiety. This divergence between perception and reality often precedes major economic corrections. Experts are particularly alarmed by the combination of rising delinquency rates with stagnant wages, increasing housing costs, and high household debt levels. These multiple financial pressures converge simultaneously, creating what economists term financial fragility among consumers. The auto loan market exemplifies this problem. Rising car prices combined with higher interest rates have caused monthly payments to skyrocket. Even borrowers with good credit feel the squeeze, while lower income and subprime borrowers face the harshest impact. Forced to purchase higher-priced used cars with limited options, placing them in precarious financial positions. Financial experts see a troubling picture emerging when analyzing these factors together: rising delinquencies, increasing credit reliance for basics, and growing financial strain despite low unemployment. It resembles storm clouds gathering on the horizon, while most people continue enjoying the sunshine. The timing of these warning signs during a supposedly strong economic period causes particular concern. Traditionally, serious delinquency problems emerge during recessions, not when unemployment remains relatively low and consumer spending strong. This unusual timing suggests underlying structural problems that could significantly worsen any future downturn. The mental health impact of growing financial strain adds another dimension. The American Psychological Association has declared a mental health crisis with money stress as a leading cause. Financial stress creates feelings of fear, anxiety, and helplessness that can lead to diagnosable conditions, sleep disorders, and physical health issues. This psychological aspect creates a feedback loop that can further deteriorate financial situations. Many households have exhausted their financial buffers after years of economic stress, making the situation more challenging. Pandemic savings have largely depleted, and emergency funds are non-existent for millions of Americans. Even a minor economic slowdown could quickly escalate into a serious crisis for many families. Rising car loan delinquencies illustrate this brewing trouble. With new vehicle payments averaging over $700 monthly, even middle-income Americans struggle to keep up. People typically prioritize vehicle payments since they need transportation for work, so missed payments indicate serious financial distress, essentially acting as canaries in the coal mine for consumer financial health. While these warning signs don't guarantee an imminent crash, they suggest increasing vulnerability in our financial system that could amplify even modest economic shocks. Understanding that headline economic numbers often mask the lived reality of financial strain is crucial for average Americans. A growing economy doesn't automatically translate to growing financial security for individual households. The compensation disconnect. All this talk about economic warning signs might seem abstract, but there's a financial disconnect happening much closer to home, at your actual job. Think your boss understands your money struggles? Think again. A mind-blowing 61% of Americans believe executives have zero clue about the financial realities facing their employees, creating a workplace powder keg that's about to blow. Remember when getting a raise actually meant something? Those days are fading fast. The compensation satisfaction is plummeting right before our eyes. Just 2 years ago, a healthy majority of workers felt good about their paychecks. Today, that satisfaction has taken a nosedive, with negative feelings about compensation jumping from 23% to 33% in just 12 months. That's 1/3 of the entire workforce feeling financially undervalued, a troubling indicator in a supposedly strong job market. What's happening with actual salary increases paints an even grimmer picture. For the second straight year, 40% of salaried workers haven't received any raise at all. Meanwhile, inflation keeps eating away at whatever money they do have. For the 60% who did get raises, the increases are shrinking dramatically. The average bump was just 3.6%, down from 4.6% last year and 6.2% the year before. When matched against inflation, most people are effectively making less than they were before their raise. I got what my company called a competitive 3% raise this year, says Michael, an operations manager in Phoenix. But with my rent up 15% and groceries costing way more, I'm actually falling behind every month despite working harder than ever. The disconnect between leadership and employees runs deep. More than half of regular employees feel genuinely annoyed by how out of touch senior staff are about what it's actually like trying to survive on a typical paycheck. They're living in completely different economic realities. The wage situation is particularly troubling when examining gender differences. Only 55% of women received a salary increase last year compared to 64% of men. When women did get raises, they averaged just 2.7%, while men averaged 4.8%. Women are almost 50% more likely to feel negatively about their compensation, with 39% expressing dissatisfaction compared to 27% of men. This gender disparity exists within a broader trend where the gap between executive and worker pay has exploded. From 1978 to 2021, CEO compensation grew by a staggering 1,460%, while regular worker pay increased by only 18.1%. By 2021, S&P 500 CEOs were making 324 times what the average worker earned, pocketing $18.3 million compared to the average worker's $58,260. Workers are understandably getting restless. The Bamboo HR survey found that 77% of employees would consider changing jobs for better pay. What's telling is how the monetary threshold for leaving keeps dropping. In 2022, employees said they'd need a 16.1% raise to consider leaving. Last year, that dropped to 13.3%. Now, they'd leave for just 12.5%. This downward trend reveals increasing desperation as people seek smaller increases just to keep up with rising costs. While executives focus on unemployment rates and other headline economic numbers, they're missing their employees' lived experience. Low unemployment offers little comfort when your paycheck buys less every month. Companies boast about competitive compensation while ignoring that 44% of their workforce stays only because their current salary, inadequate as it may be, offers some security in uncertain times. This compensation disconnect damages both workers and businesses. When a third of your workforce feels negatively about their pay, productivity suffers, innovation declines, and customer service deteriorates. The emotional investment driving exceptional work disappears, and eventually, your best people leave. The situation becomes more volatile as employees increasingly link their compensation directly to mental well-being. Over a third report a direct correlation between what they're paid and their mental health. When 36% of your workforce says their paycheck affects their psychological state, you're facing a potential mental health crisis within your company. Companies ignoring these warning signs are taking a dangerous gamble. While executives focus on quarterly targets and shareholder returns, employees worry about immediate concerns, affording rent, needing side gigs, or putting groceries on credit cards. These financial distractions prevent companies from getting their workforce's best efforts. The most short-sighted approach is assuming a tight job market means compensation concerns can be ignored. The data shows employees are increasingly willing to risk job changes for modest pay improvements, especially when they're one unexpected expense away from serious financial trouble. This disconnect feels particularly egregious when many companies post record profits. Seeing company success celebrated while personal financial struggles are ignored creates a toxic workplace dynamic. It's difficult to feel motivated about helping a company succeed when that success doesn't translate into your own financial security. For businesses wanting to avoid this growing crisis, acknowledging reality is essential. They must recognize that inflation has fundamentally changed what constitutes fair compensation, understand that employees need higher wages to maintain their standard of living, and work to close the awareness gap between leadership and frontline workers through genuine empathy and communication, not just empty statements about valuing employees. The mental health price tag. That disconnect between what bosses think employees need and what they actually need isn't just hurting wallets, it's literally rewiring brains. The financial pressure so many Americans feel isn't some abstract concept. It's a biological reality with serious consequences for your mental and physical health. Financial stress is a chronic condition characterized by persistent feelings of fear, anxiety, and helplessness that follows you everywhere. Picture this. It's 3 a.m., and while the world sleeps, you're wide awake, staring at the ceiling. Your mind obsessively calculates how to stretch your remaining funds until payday. Every unexpected bill feels like an emergency. This isn't occasional worry. It's a constant state of alert that changes how your brain functions. When you experience chronic financial pressure, your brain floods with cortisol and other stress hormones, creating measurable biological changes that damage your health over time. This biological response manifests in physical symptoms: persistent headaches, digestive problems, muscle tension, insomnia, all direct results of your body responding to a financial threat that never seems to go away. The TIAA Institute's 2024 report reveals a national mental health emergency. 42% of U.S. adults say money worries directly contribute to anxiety, depression, and anger. Even more alarming, according to the Financial Health Network, 76% of financially vulnerable Americans report high or moderate financial stress compared to just 13% of financially healthy people. That 63-point gap represents a mental health crisis splitting America into two vastly different psychological realities. This stress creates a vicious cycle. The physical symptoms often trigger healthcare costs you can't afford, generating more financial stress and worsening health. People carrying medical debt are 3 times more likely to struggle with anxiety, depression, or chronic stress, explaining why many Americans avoid seeking medical care even when they need it. Financial stress also impairs cognitive function. When your brain constantly processes financial worry, it loses bandwidth for other decisions. This explains why people under financial pressure sometimes make counterproductive choices. Your brain literally lacks the processing power for optimal long-term decisions when consumed with immediate financial survival. A revealing 2017 study challenges how we think about this connection. Researchers found financially strained respondents who reported feeling stressed showed significantly elevated depression levels. However, and this is critical, those experiencing identical financial difficulties who didn't report feeling stressed had depression scores similar to people without any financial strain at all. This suggests how you perceive financial challenges might be as important as the challenges themselves. This connects to self-efficacy. Research shows people with higher levels of perceived competence demonstrate lower levels of financial stress, even when facing identical financial difficulties. The psychological toll is heaviest when people feel a complete lack of control over their finances. Feelings of hopelessness and the perception of lacking agency are strongly associated with serious mental health issues. For couples and families, this stress creates relationship strain beyond arguments about money. When both partners constantly worry about finances, their ability to connect emotionally, support each other, and parent effectively diminishes. Children absorb this tension, potentially affecting their own mental health and development. What makes addressing financial stress particularly challenging is its stigma. People struggling typically don't broadcast their difficulties, creating a perception that everyone else is doing fine, which intensifies feelings of personal failure. This silence means many suffer alone, unaware that millions experience identical struggles. The workplace impact is profound, but largely invisible. Employees bringing financial stress to work are physically present but mentally elsewhere, running calculations or worrying about bills. This presenteeism costs companies billions in lost productivity annually, yet most organizations barely address financial wellness meaningfully. For young adults entering today's economy, the psychological weight is even heavier. Many start their financial lives with significant student debt, facing unprecedented housing costs and entering a job market where wages haven't kept pace with inflation. This creates a perfect storm of financial anxiety that shapes their relationship with money and their mental health for decades. The pandemic added another layer to this crisis. Many Americans who had carefully built financial security watched it disappear during lockdowns and job losses. This experience of suddenly losing stability created a new kind of financial trauma that continues to affect the suburban trap. Beyond pandemic financial trauma lurks a deceptive trap disguised as success. Imagine following society's perfect blueprint: college, career, marriage, suburban home, only to discover you've locked yourself into a life where 40% of your income vanishes before you can enjoy it. For Rachel and Garrett Mazzeo, this isn't a hypothetical scenario. It's their daily reality, and they're far from alone. Rachel and Garrett represent the quintessential American success story, on paper at least. They checked all the boxes society told them would lead to happiness and financial security: college degrees, paid down student loans, marriage, and that suburban home with the manicured lawn, everything their parents encouraged them to pursue. But now, sitting at their kitchen table each month, they find themselves prisoners to a detailed spreadsheet. Every dollar is monitored, tracked, and allocated with military precision. This financial straitjacket determines virtually every aspect of their lives, from groceries to weekend activities. "We're hunkering down financially," Rachel explains, their budget leaving minimal wiggle room after essential expenses. That dream home? It consumes approximately 40% of their take-home pay, forming just the foundation of their financial obligations. Their suburban life resembles a gilded cage, beautiful to observers but confining to its inhabitants. The mortgage payment that seemed manageable during the approval process now competes with property taxes, homeowners insurance, and utilities that spike seasonally. The parade of maintenance costs marches on relentlessly: lawn care, appliance repairs, roof maintenance, and emergency fixes that arise with suspicious regularity. Transportation compounds this financial prison. Suburban life mandates car dependency. 2 vehicles mean double payments, double insurance, double maintenance, and twice the fuel for lengthy commutes. Those commutes consume over 200 hours annually per person, 5 full work weeks of unpaid time sitting in traffic instead of building relationships or side hustles. What's revealing about their situation is how it's transformed their perspective on traditional financial advice. The conventional wisdom that buying is always better than renting now appears outdated, a relic from an era when housing prices aligned more reasonably with incomes. This realization makes them hesitant to encourage their young son, Miles, to follow their path. How could they recommend a journey that's left them feeling trapped despite doing everything right? The trap becomes most apparent when homeowners want to make a change. Today's interest rate environment has created the lock-in effect, a situation where moving becomes financially irrational. Millions secured mortgages at historically low rates during the pandemic. With today's significantly higher rates, selling means trading a 3% mortgage for one that's double or triple. This interest rate disparity creates a true paradox. The privilege of a low rate becomes the chain that binds you to your property. Job opportunity elsewhere? Can't move. Need more space? Too expensive to upgrade? Want to downsize for better cash flow? The math rarely works when calculating current interest rates. The cruel irony: these suburban homeowners appear successful to outside observers. Their homes look impressive, their cars relatively new, maintaining all outward appearances of middle-class prosperity. Behind closed doors, they're obsessively tracking every dollar, postponing repairs, and arguing about affording simple pleasures like weekend getaways. The suburban lifestyle marketed to Americans was portrayed as embodying freedom, your own land, your own space. Yet it often delivers the opposite: financial constraint, reduced mobility, and constant maintenance demands. The physical space gained comes at the cost of financial flexibility lost. For many trapped in this system, there's growing recognition they've purchased a false promise. Financial services, real estate sectors, and well-meaning parents painted suburban homeownership as the ultimate achievement and cornerstone of wealth building. For Rachel and Garrett's generation, the financial equation simply doesn't compute as it did for their parents. This trap extends beyond finances into social psychology. Pressure to maintain appearances, keep up with neighbors, and fulfill the successful suburban homeowner role leads to additional spending on home decor, landscaping, and status signaling expenses, straining already tight budgets. What's becoming clear is that traditional suburban living was designed for a different economic era: stronger wage growth, reasonable housing costs, and shorter commutes. Today's reality demands rethinking financial success. Forward-thinking millennials are pioneering alternatives: co-housing arrangements sharing maintenance costs, remote work eliminating commutes, house hacking strategies offsetting mortgage costs, and urban living in walkable neighborhoods making car ownership optional rather than essential. For millions already locked into suburban living, like Rachel and Garrett, escaping requires careful planning and strategic decisions. They're considering refinancing if rates drop, reducing transportation costs, and reevaluating what lifestyle they want to model for their son. The challenging truth: escaping the suburban trap requires difficult trade-offs and honest conversations about priorities. Is the spacious home worth the financial stress? Is homeownership prestige worth lost flexibility? Is the traditional path still worthwhile when economic landscapes have shifted so dramatically? Building financial resilience. Those tough conversations about priorities aren't just for suburban homeowners. They're essential for anyone trying to navigate today's economic quicksand. The truth about financial resilience that most experts won't tell you is simple. It's not about getting rich. It's about creating systems that won't collapse when the economy does. Financial resilience functions as your personal economic shock absorber, enabling you to handle surprise expenses, job losses, or recurring recessions. Most financial advice remains outdated, focusing on superficial solutions while ignoring systemic issues affecting your finances. Financial resilience in 2025 begins with an emergency fund. Having 6 to 12 months of living expenses stored away provides freedom and options. Setting aside 6 to 12 months of living expenses in an emergency fund is a key strategy for financial stability, financial experts advise. This buffer transforms your decision-making process, preventing desperate job acceptances or high-interest credit card debt for emergencies. Regarding debt, the strategic approach differs from conventional wisdom. Strategic debt management often makes more sense than eliminating all debt immediately. Prioritize high-interest debt while working strategically with lower-interest debt to maximize your overall financial position. Consider this example: aggressively paying down credit card debt makes mathematical sense because it's equivalent to earning a guaranteed 18 to 24% return on your money. As one financial advisor explains, if you have a credit card charging 18%, repaying that credit card debt is the equivalent of earning an 18% rate of return. Meanwhile, rushing to pay off a 3% mortgage while neglecting retirement savings often reduces long-term financial resilience, especially during inflation. Income diversification provides essential protection in today's economy. Building multiple income streams creates backup systems when one source gets disrupted. Mark, a software developer, weathered a company layoff without financial stress because he had developed a freelance client base generating 30% of his income. This diversification allowed him to maintain financial stability while finding new full-time employment. Learning and refining new skills tied to your career can help protect against inflation and make you more marketable when searching for employment, explains one financial expert. Your skill set becomes financial insurance. When you can generate income multiple ways, you're protected against industry downturns. Your skill set can be one of your best defenses against inflation, notes one career strategist. Wages tend to rise over time, and the more your skill set is in demand, the greater chance you have of growing your income and outpacing inflation. Maintaining liquidity, having accessible assets when needed, is crucial for resilience. This means balanced saving across different account types with varying accessibility levels. This cash reserve prevents having to withdraw from invested assets that may be trading at a lower value because of a market decline, explains one financial planner. Investments need time to recover when the market is down, and this can potentially take years to happen. Scenario planning represents another resilience cornerstone. Instead of building financial plans based on perfect conditions, prepare for multiple possible futures. Preparing for multiple future scenarios enables quick adaptation, explains one financial expert. This means developing response plans for job loss, health crises, or family support needs before they occur. Technology supports this awareness. Leveraging technology such as budgeting apps and financial planning tools can streamline the money management process and help individuals stay on track, notes one expert. These tools provide real-time visibility that enables resilience. Investment approaches differ for the financially resilient. Balance growth with protection rather than maximizing returns. Market volatility, coupled with a shifting political environment, amplifies risk, explains one investment strategist. Diversifying into small-cap value and international equities is essential to managing this risk. Financial resilience doesn't require massive wealth or complex strategies. It's built through consistent habits and realistic thinking about what creates security in today's economy. Automating contributions to retirement and savings accounts eliminates the temptation to spend and ensures steady progress toward financial goals, advises one financial planner. Key resilience strategies include building a 6 to 12-month emergency fund as your financial foundation, strategically managing debt based on interest rates and opportunity costs, developing multiple income streams through diverse skills and investments, maintaining liquid assets you can access without penalties, creating scenario plans for different economic situations, using technology to track and manage your financial position, balancing investment growth with protection against volatility, automating savings to ensure consistent progress. This systematic approach creates resilience over time. Small, regular actions compound into significant protection against economic uncertainty. The financially resilient aren't necessarily the highest earners. They're those who've built financial systems that function across multiple economic scenarios. Redefining the American dream. Financial resilience isn't just about playing defense. Sometimes it's about changing the game entirely. The most educated generation in history is now asking a question their parents never dared to. What if the traditional American dream isn't just harder to achieve today, but actually a debt trap disguised as success? For millions of young Americans, the old rulebook fails to address today's economic reality. Carrying student loan debt that rivals a 1980s mortgage, while houses cost 7 times annual income, demands a comprehensive redesign of success rather than simply working harder within a broken system. This generation is pioneering entirely new definitions of living well. They question whether the financial chains of a 3,000 square foot house with 2 SUVs deliver actual happiness. They're discovering that freedom from conventional expectations often leads to greater fulfillment. The shift redefines success metrics to focus on what genuinely correlates with happiness: career flexibility, meaningful experiences, community connections, and sustainable mental well-being. Take Jamie, a former marketing executive who transitioned to life as a digital nomad. She works remotely while living in different countries quarterly. Her income decreased by 30%, but her happiness multiplied. "I used to spend 2 hours commuting to earn money for a house I barely saw," she explains. "Now my office is wherever I want, and I've built genuine connections across 4 continents. My parents think I'm crazy, but I've never been more satisfied." The tiny house movement represents another alternative where deliberate downsizing of living space liberates resources. Homes under 400 square feet slash housing costs by up to 70%, eliminate maintenance headaches, and create bandwidth for meaningful pursuits. Have you considered how much of your living space you actually use daily? Co-housing communities offer a third path, with private homes alongside shared spaces and resources. Pooling costs for childcare, tools, and vehicles creates economies of scale impossible for individual households. Residents report that while financial benefits attracted them initially, the social connections ultimately provided greater value. How might your life improve with built-in community support? These alternatives represent mainstream responses to an economic system failing to deliver on its promises. The conventional path frequently leads to what psychologists term affluent neglect, possessing nice things but lacking time or energy to enjoy them or nurture relationships. Remarkably, these alternative paths often provide greater financial security than traditional approaches. Reduced fixed expenses and minimal debt create breathing room during economic downturns. A tiny house dweller with minimal monthly obligations can weather job loss far longer than someone carrying suburban mortgage debt. This reimagining extends beyond youth. Many mid-career professionals are embracing downshifting, selecting less prestigious positions with better work-life balance after witnessing colleagues suffer burnout, health crises, and broken relationships. The financial calculations often prove surprising. Trading a $120,000 high-stress position with long commutes for a $75,000 job within walking distance looks like a downgrade initially. Factor in reduced transportation costs, fewer stress-related medical expenses, and home-cooked meals replacing expensive takeout, and the quality of life improvement becomes dramatic while financial impact remains minimal. Community-oriented success models challenge the isolation of traditional achievement. Co-working spaces, skill-sharing networks, and community gardens provide resource access without individual ownership requirements. When 5 neighboring families share one high-quality lawnmower instead of each owning mediocre ones, everyone saves money while strengthening community bonds. This principle extends to everything from tools to childcare to transportation. Research consistently confirms that beyond meeting basic needs, additional consumption contributes little to life satisfaction. Meanwhile, meaningful relationships, purpose, and autonomy reliably predict well-being. What aspects of your current lifestyle genuinely contribute to your happiness? Those embracing alternative success definitions rarely express regret. While traditional success often brings a nagging, "is this all there is" feeling, people who consciously design lifestyles aligned with their values report profound authenticity and peace. This doesn't require selling everything and moving into a van, though van life represents another growing alternative. The shift can be subtle, examining each life choice through the lens of, "does this support my well-being?" rather than, "is this what successful people do?" For some, it means renting long-term rather than stretching to buy an unaffordable house. For others, it involves selecting careers offering flexibility over maximum income. The common thread isn't any particular lifestyle, but rather conscious questioning of whether conventional success markers deliver what truly matters. This approach redirects ambition toward goals creating genuine satisfaction rather than merely projecting success. In a system designed for maximum profit extraction, opting out of certain consumption patterns becomes revolutionary. As more people embrace these alternative definitions, they create communities and support systems making these choices accessible to others. Online groups for minimalists, digital nomads, homesteaders, and financial independence seekers provide roadmaps for those questioning traditional paths. What would your reimagined success look like? So here's the real talk about money in 2025. It's time to stop beating yourself up and start getting real. When half of employed Americans are struggling despite doing everything right, that's not a you problem, that's a system problem. The good news? You have more power than you think. By aligning your money choices with what truly matters to you, you can build something sustainable. Your mental health deserves protection from financial stress. Being smart with money means creating stability that lets you sleep at night. Ready to take control? Join our community of financial